James, thank you for being here at the BRE. We would like to explore together energy.
Mm-hmm.
We would like to explore together the relevance that open data may have in innovating the energy sector.
Mm-hmm.
And we would like to start in our exploration of the energy world from a little bit of future thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We are getting more and more on this little planet, and we know the resources are limited. So there is something to be said on how the demographic pressure is forcing the energy sector to reinvent itself. Understanding how efficiency can be found in the existing grid, and how to better invest in the future growth of the grid itself. So you are running an incredibly interesting startup within the energy sector. You're trying to change and improve things within your practice on a day-to-day basis. I'm very curious to ask you, where are we going with energy? Where is our energy going to come from? Yeah, I would just leave it like that for now.
Where are we going with energy? I got involved in energy because I think we're in a really exciting phase. We're in a transition phase right now. I'm not at all doom and gloom about the future of the energy sector globally. I think we're about to transition into a world which is mainly powered by decentralized renewables, and I think in particular solar power plays a big part in that. And I think we're moving into a world where we're going to have electric vehicles connected into everyone's homes that could provide some sort of buffering service to the grid. So actually we could be moving towards a more efficient usage of a grid, which actually lowers costs for consumers. And I think we're moving into a world where, with the rollout of with smart meters, a more data-driven energy sector, which can only, once it's properly harnessed, and open data plays a big part in this, can really start to do things a lot more sensibly. There's a lot of things which are done because it makes sense without having lots of data or open data, and costs are duplicated all over the place. And by having to get more systems thinking, data-driven systems thinking, we could be cutting down costs all over the place, as well as moving towards a decarbonised, resilient, decentralised energy sector. So I think there's lots of opportunity, and if I'm honest, there needs to be a kind of as time goes forward in the next 10 years, there needs to be a radical rethink on the way the systems are right now. We can't just carry on as we are.
I'm very interested in understanding the relationship between renewables, versus fossil fuels,
Mm-hmm.
And various distributions, layout, and options.
Mm-hmm.
Are we bound, or is it possible through investment in renewables to also innovate our grid?
We're going to have to. For example, in the southwest region in the UK at the moment, quite recently they've announced that they cannot connect any more small-scale renewables to the grid because it's just congested. They've got, Cornwall in particular it's been one of the leaders in adoption of wind and solar, but now they can't add any more because the grid is at its capacity for dealing with the backflow of energy. And we need to start doing things more efficiently. The key things here are putting in more energy storage, distributing energy storage throughout the grid. There is having smarter connections between the generation of energy and the consumption of energy. And there's some key things in that area which open data could play a good part. For example, if something's windy, in a windy day, a factory can shift its demand a little bit to basically match off that excess generation. These sort of things that would actually start to make better use of the grid and allow more renewables to be put onto the grid. And obviously to reach our decarbonisation targets, that's kind of important.
So renewables will allow not only to meet our carbon targets, but it will force us to improve our grid. Would it be possible also to have more choice in the way we buy our energy?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what we started out to do at Open Utility is taking analogies with all the other sectors where the internet and data and open data has been disrupting. It's all about giving consumers much more choice about whether they're buying a house or renting an apartment, booking a cab. It's all about choice, access, and control, and ultimately cost as well. And
you don't think we could have more choice than we have today?
At the moment, you're looking at a picture where last time I checked, I think it was 31 licensed suppliers. It's increasing. There's a lot more new entrants as of the last few years. Your complete domain as a consumer is choosing which supplier to go with. So you can go to a price comparison website, and you can look at the cost. So most will go for low cost. You can actually, the only other element control is, can I go for a renewable tariff or a renewable, and then in fact there's an ethical company as well who gives its money or profits to a charity to tackle fuel poverty. So there's some choice, but in the internet world that's very limited. It's like going onto eBay and having 31 products you can buy from. It's ridiculously limited. You cannot, for example, as a consumer based in Cornwall, buy from Cornish generators. You can't, as a supporter of onshore wind, pay a premium to buy from onshore wind to encourage that industry, if you choose to pay a premium, that is, to encourage that industry and show you basically vote for onshore wind. You cannot buy from community energy groups or within your locality. You cannot buy from innovative technologies, for example, new tidal turbine designs. There's just there's no level of choice out there at the moment. And that is the kernel of what we're trying to tackle with Open Utility, at least, is giving that level of choice.
So how did you start it? Tell us more about Open Utility.
So Open Utility wasn't where we started with this. I actually started as from being inspired from watching a talk on YouTube by Bob Metcalfe. He was one of the inventors of the Ethernet protocol, and he was tasked by MIT to take his experience of the development of the internet, because he was there as part of developing the internet throughout the last 50 years, and see if you can draw parallels to the way we should do things in energy. So he created a talk called the Enernet, the Energy Internet. And it's a truly inspiring talk, and it's basically, we should be doing things completely differently. We should be turning things upside down. There shouldn't be centralized control of a grid. There should be decentralized. Should be packets of energy flowing around. There should be layers of. There should be protocols where you have a physical layer where the energy and the grid. You have a transport layer where you're connecting different buyers and sellers together. You maybe have a sort of a access layer on the top where, you have open data sets where people can plug in and create value by creating apps and things. And that sort of vision got us thinking, and I thought, well, let's try and see if we can take one of these key ideas in the internet, which is peer-to-peer file sharing, and see if we can do that in the energy world.
So give us an example. How are we sharing energy now? Are we distributing energy now? And how could we sharing energy?
So there's, I guess, going back to basics, there's a grid where we basically, you can take energy off or you can put energy on if you're a generator. And then there's a sort of a marketplace, which is more of a virtual thing. So if you're buying from a certain supplier, or if you eventually could buy from a generator, you're not actually rerouting any electrons, but you're actually just having a financial transaction. So I'm going to take off 2 units as long as those 2 units are being put on. And what we were thinking is the model, the architecture of the energy industry right now is centralized. It's you have these licensed suppliers that basically buy from a variety of different generators and some from wholesale markets as well. They basically package that up into tariffs and then sell that on to consumers. And both the generators and the consumers have very little control. They have very little interaction. There's no sort of provenance going through the system of where their energy mix really is, or where their supplier is buying their energy from. And this idea of peer-to-peer is essentially just linking the consumer directly to the generator and actually giving them the control to create their own personal energy mix. So a consumer can build up a mix which is made up of wind, of solar, or in the true philosophy of choice, they could hate renewables and they just want fossil fuels. It's up to them to have that control. The chances are most people will choose renewables because that's actually what we like as a society, is actually renewables. And we're kind of stopped by the way the system is more than anything else. And that's where we started coming into some real technical challenges. Is if you're buying bits of energy from lots of different sources, how do you balance that system? And I, in conjunction with my co-founder of Open Utility, Andy, we basically designed a protocol for peer-to-peer energy sharing. And then we realized there's potentially a business here. So we decided to start the company. We brought on board Alice as another founder. She has experience in basically designing user-friendly websites. Me and Andy are sort of data geeks, and she's the sort of the human interaction element. And that's when we realized, just as we started the company, that actually technology aside, what you need to have is a business model. And then we started poking around in the utility world and realized, oh my goodness, this is a really complex industry. There's so much regulation, there's incumbent players, there's layers of legacy systems, there's immense cost and barriers to entry. And what we basically struggled for about 1.5 years to really build up our idea and build up credibility, momentum in what we're doing. And the thing which really changed things for us was earlier last year we managed to secure funding from the Department of Energy and Climate Change. They got the idea. A lot of people are sort of dismissive of DEC as not being very innovative, but actually we found that they are very forward thinking. And again, they, as much as everyone else, is just sort of it's this big it's the system which is the problem. It's just so big and it moves so slowly, and everyone wants to do something innovative, and the system says no.
So DEC was influential for you to be taken seriously by the rest of the industry.
Exactly. Which, it's a neat way of putting it. And obviously DEC were concerned about not breaching regulations. So one of the conditions of getting the funding was that Ofgem were to be on board with it, and they became on board. So we're basically, they're in the loop. We're reporting to them as well about our progress. But the funding came through, and that sort of changed everything for our relationship with the suppliers. And actually, we had to put out a competitive bid to find the best partner for us, and which is, as we announced in March, that's Good Energy. They're one of the leading renewables-focused independent suppliers based just outside Bath, and we've been working closely with them since the start of the year. And basically with them we're going to launch our pilot of our service. We're calling Pick Low. Could either mean pick low cost energy or pick local energy. It kind of again leaves it up for you to decide. And Picklo will be launching with 25 renewable generators and 25 business customers in August. And then basically what we're doing is an online marketplace, which we're closing the gap. We're enabling the business customers to have this direct relationship with renewable generators.
In terms of data, your customers, which are commercial customers, commercial energy users, what sort of information would they have access to compared to a standard supplier?
So there's no such thing as a standard supplier. I'll sort of just jump in there. We've found that there's a wide variety of competencies when it comes to data, and forgetting about open data, just getting access to your own data. Some suppliers, it's just very difficult for a customer to phone up and say, they'll have to phone up because that's the only way to contact some of them, and actually try and find out where's the data. And then some other suppliers, you have a direct visibility from day one of what your data, you have access to it. There's no option about taking part in any sort of national open data program. It's open data isn't a phrase or a concept which is in the energy sector really at the moment. It's right now they're really struggling to get access to the data for your own data. That's the challenge that they see right now. So I guess that's one of the key things about open data in the energy sector at the moment is it's a struggle for a lot of the incumbent players to even understand what it is, because they're almost the fires that they're fighting are almost one layer before that, about okay, we need to get data first. We need smart meters. We need to be able to handle having lots of data. And I guess the value add around having open data isn't even in their brainwaves at the moment, I don't think.
We do know though that historically collecting data related to energy use is controversial. By analysing anyone's energy profile, one will be able to spot exactly when the family is at home or when it's not. So it is fair to say that there is a security issue related particularly to residential energy use. So are we somehow defining a third category between closed data and open data? Or in other words, what level of openness do we need and require for the energy sector to innovate itself?
I've got a few comments. First one is, I think you're right. There is this middle ground, which could be quite easily summarized as third-party access. So if you are a business that's going to add value to customers' lives in some way, for example, being able to analyze people's consumption to help them improve their energy, reduce their bills, and you want access to someone's data, it should be very easy for you to, if the customer basically ticks a box on your app or something, or digital signature or whatever, it should be very easy for a third-party service provider to use that data and add value. It's not necessarily easy at the moment. But I guess going back to I think you're exactly right about some energy data maybe shouldn't be open as standard, and perhaps people should be given the ability to make an easy choice whether they want to open it up or not. So for example, BRE would probably want to show off, hopefully would want to show off its energy use. So there was no reason really to keep it private. Public buildings as well, it's the same. I think that the key is getting all the data in a similar format, a machine readable, similar standardized format, which can be open or closed. And it's not two different types of data sets, but one data set, and it's just a flip of a switch that you can turn it open or closed. And I think that's the key. And giving, making sure that the standardized format meets all the requirements of security concerns in the energy sector, but allows, seamless integration with people who want to add value to it.
So DEC really could still play a crucial role in being that authority that may give permission for the third party to gain access to those data sets. And I think, the more we start thinking about the potential use of energy data, the more the need for standardization on the one hand and sharing, maybe let's not call it opening, but sharing data sets, becomes a reality, I would say. And the case of open utility seems to be an incredibly practical application of alternative thinking to the current grid model. So let's imagine that now DEC or someone else has taken that role. Let's imagine that there is a public authority able to grant or deny access to energy data. And let's imagine now that a third party exists. So it's made of people like you, developers, software developers, data scientists and energy engineers that create a new impetus in the energy sector for innovation. Let's imagine this happens, in 5, 10,
it's going to
10
happen.
years. It's going to happen, yeah.
Positive,
so,
yeah.
Let's say this is going to happen. How would you like the energy sector to change should that package of data be made available?
So I think the key thing is it's not just about the role of what we call suppliers, the entities which currently buy and sell energy on your behalf, or the buying and selling element. I think it's also about the grid infrastructure, because if you look at a bill now, the cost breakdown, a large amount of that is going to is the cost of transporting that energy to your home. And I think that's where having this standardized format, which can be open or closed, would have a lot of value. So you start to connect your ability to buy energy on this sort of standardized format. So you could be, choosing to buy different units from different sources, but then you could be connecting in the same format your energy storage device, which will ramp up and down depending on whether the grid needs some support or not, or whether there's, in Cornwall there's too much wind and the grid needs you to use more energy. And the key value, I think, there is having this one format and giving everyone who needs access to that to make it work, make a service work. So in this case, it's the grid operator, it's you as a consumer, the battery, the manufacturer of the battery control system who needs to know what that format is so it can ramp up and down its energy storage, and it's the factory and the generator down the road who want to, and there's a lot of communication that could be going on in near real time to add a lot of value and basically reduce the cost by quite a considerable amount. The challenge is right now, because doesn't exist, is it's very bespoke. You can kind of do all this sort of stuff if you set up very bespoke arrangements and you get some data from here, you put some metering in here, and you pull it all together. It's quite expensive, and some of the benefits are very, very little because of all the additional complexities and bespoke arrangements. And some things are just not possible right now, like the grid operators they're doing sort of innovation projects in this area, but they don't have a sort of controlled ability to make it scale, basically.
Let's focus on the users now. Let's focus on residential users, families.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that the Big Six have done quite, good work on raising awareness in energy usage. The smart metering is a reality, and hopefully this should change the way we go about energy, we use energy, and eventually we start thinking of ourselves in a few years' time, not only as users, but also as suppliers,
Mm-hmm.
as much as off-grid generator can do.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move back to the example we had earlier. So imagine data is available. How could the user experience change, and how could they become more involved in driving efficiency?
So I think the difficult thing with behavioural change as a concept in energy is it's historically been very difficult to design, and actually the best cases of behavioural change are more accidental. I found you do something and then there's either a positive or negative example. There are some some places where it does work, and an interesting one, which is a company in the US, US company called Opower, you may have heard of. This is the type of service that they provide. Again, they're a third-party service that partner with utility companies, and it's basically showing you your energy consumption compared to your neighbours or other types of buildings which are similar as yours, maybe similar size or number, your children are the same age, and this is competition element of actually I'm the only one in this neighborhood who's using twice as much energy as everyone else. That's embarrassing. So I'm going to reduce my demand. And what they've found is actually an interesting thing. So if there tends to, in this competitive process, there tends to be a sort of averaging out in the middle. So some people who are using less energy than everyone else actually start to use more. But in general, because those are few and far between. So actually, in total, like I think Opower have said they've turned the equivalent of not building like a dozen power stations since they launched 7 years ago. So, that's a neat example. And again, that there needs to be more companies, especially in the UK and Europe, that can give this sort of access to customers. And it's just difficult because you need to get these bespoke partnership arrangements with licensed suppliers. Each supplier, each region, you need to, globally, you need to do it, rather than, if you're developing an app to go on an app store, you build it once, you put it on an app store, it's done. That's where we need to get to in terms of, on a service provider, creating these interesting applications. It needs to be just as simple as developing an app and putting it on an app store.
It would seem to me that the innovation that we're benefiting from, combining energy use and mobile information technology, that kind of innovation that given us smart meter of the Internet of Things sort of generation, is going a long way in engaging with the users, engaging with all of us.
Mm-hmm.
That is yet only limited to using energy, taking
mm-hmm.
energy from the grid and using energy to run things.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that reversing that process and having that kind of Internet of Things awareness on producing energy, providing energy to the grid, is probably the missing link to start this mini revolution.
Yeah, I think we're all set for this revolution where every building is a considerable proportion of their power comes from solar in particular. Wind is not particularly good in urban areas because of the wind vortices, but in solar and with battery technology, so it's not just confined to daytime. A lot of properties could be nearly off-grid or at least producing surpluses and sometimes requiring energy from the grid. And this system requires two things to work, in my opinion. First of all, the grid needs to be able to accommodate sort of bidirectional flows of power, and it needs this sort of standardized format of sharing data, and some of this data should be closed for security concerns, some of it should be open. Create an open marketplace. Someone can find out what's the best price to ramp up their energy storage by looking at all the different prices, and where am I going to invest in providing grid backup, looking at the country and actually here are the areas where there's so much congestion. I'm going to invest in this area because I get a better return. There's this ability for the grid to interoperate with people's actions and choices is the first thing. And the second thing is a secure peer-to-peer transaction and trading protocol. This is, I guess, where we will probably want to eventually evolve our service. But this idea, I mean, the ability for using decentralized ledgers, for example, for recording transactions. We all know about sort of things like bitcoins and things like that, but it's a bit of a scare word, I guess, at the moment. But there's a lot of innovation around the way that micropayments are processed in a peer-to-peer way. That whole layer of innovation, again, could really shake up the industry and ultimately deliver lower cost, more efficient systems.
My last question.
Yeah.
If a young person, a young student, today wants to enter the energy sector, what's your one word of advice you'd give them?
Study computer science, because energy will be a subset of the internet and data, and not the other way around.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.